What was it like in a Victorian prison? A rising crime rate in the 1800s led to new prisons being built and old ones being extended. The Victorians believed that prison should be as unpleasant as possible. They wanted to deter further crimes and reoffenses. To make sure it was unpleasant, hard labor was implemented, such as walking on the treadwheel. 10 minutes on, 5 minutes off for 8 hours a day. This helped power some of the prison's machinery. Another less meaningful form of labor was the crank. It was located right in the cell, and the prisoner had to rotate it a certain amount of times to earn a meal. And all the crank did was rotate paddles in a box of sand. And no talking was strictly enforced. There were over 11,000 offenses against this rule in just 1 year. You were fed a deliberately monotonous diet, and the hammock beds were eventually replaced with hard wooden board beds. Do you think you could have survived a Victorian prison? 4 family members enter a basement. None come out alive. The cause of death? Rotten potatoes. In 2013, 42-year-old law professor Mikhail Chebuchev entered the root cellar of his home in Russia and never returned. His worried wife Anastasia went looking for him and also never came back. Next, their 18-year-old son Georgie also entered and never returned. Grandmother Iraida calls a neighbor saying something suspicious is happening. Before any help arrives, she also enters the basement, suffering the same fate as the others, leaving 8-year-old Maria alone. When her grandmother also failed to return, she went to investigate herself. That is when she discovered the lifeless bodies of her family members. It was reported that solanine gas from the rotting potatoes was trapped in the root cellar, only to be released when the grandmother left the door open, which ended up saving 8-year-old Maria from suffering the same fate.
This doll terrified Australian children in the 90s. Some refer to it as a baby Slender Man, and it left a mark on kids, and not a good one. The doll, named EC, which stood for Every Child, was part of an educational show called Liftoff. The show touched on subjects such as growing up, parents, and other social issues. While the show did have good intentions, viewers found EC to be very unnerving. Countless tweets can be found of users reminiscing of this childhood nightmare. The show also featured other bizarre characters, such as a one-eyed succulent.
This chilling photo is of Marcy Borders and became known as Dust Lady. She had recently began working at the Bank of America in the World Trade Centers when the 9/11 attacks occurred. Although she survived that horrific day, she became very depressed and addicted to drugs after the attack. She managed to get help and find peace of mind, only to be struck with a cancer diagnosis in 2014. Sadly, in 2015, at the age of 42, she passed away from cancer that was caused by the dust. What was the Bloody Code? The Bloody Code was the name given to the English legal system from the late 17th century to the early 19th century. It was referred to as the Bloody Code for the huge number of crimes that could be imposed with the death penalty. In 1688, there were 50 crimes that could carry the death penalty. By 1815, it was 215, some of which included murder, arson, cutting down trees, forgery, stealing horses and sheep, destroying turnpike roads, pickpocketing goods worth a shilling, stealing from shipwrecks, and being out at night with a blackened face. A lot of these were simply to act as a deterrent. People wouldn't commit crimes if they knew they could be sentenced to death. The same reason public executions were very common. On July 30th, 2008, the passengers and driver of a Greyhound bus fled the vehicle in horror. But what caused this panicked scene on the Trans-Canada Highway? Stabbing, decapitation, and cannibalism. 40-year-old Vince Lee was sitting next to Timothy McLean when out of nowhere he began stabbing the man. As everyone began to panic, they pulled the bus over, everyone fled, and they trapped the man inside. Vince began to mutilate and partially cannibalize Timothy. It took 5 hours to arrest him as he tried to break through a window and escape. Lee was charged with second-degree murder, but pleaded not criminally responsible due to mental illness. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was sent to a psychiatric facility in 2009 and remained there until 2017. He received absolute discharge and is living freely in Manitoba. He since changed his name to Will Lee Baker and is is now considered a model citizen. Do you think he should have been released?
This is known as the ant death spiral. So what causes this and how can it cause death? This bizarre phenomenon occurs in army ants, which are blind. When an obstacle or possibly a predator gets in the way, it attempts to find another way around, losing track of the rest of the colony while doing so. The change of direction can confuse the others and they will begin following the scent of one another. This begins the death spiral, with the ants following the pheromones of the others, frantically circling endlessly. This will eventually lead to an unconscious, suicidal death by exhaustion.
Believe it or not, this unsettling character was adored by children. Its name is Ratafak Placha and was one of the hosts of the Czechoslovakian show Slineko. The show ran from 1979 to 1989 and aired almost 500 episodes, although most are lost. The show's message was to think freely, which was an important message to those living in communist Czechoslovakia. Rumors say that in 2008, the creators of the puppet didn't want it anymore, and they sent it to the TV studio in which he appeared on. They didn't know what to do with it either, so they chucked it in the dumpster. Someone discovered the puppet and made a few parody videos of their own, including a strange presidential campaign. This mannequin is so lifelike that people believe it to be a preserved corpse. La Pascualita isn't like other department store mannequins. She was constructed with such expression and such detail that her legs even have varicose veins. She first appeared in the window of a bridal shop in Mexico in 1930, and she has been turning heads ever since. But it's not just because of her realistic appearance. She also bears a very close resemblance to the shop owner's daughter. The legend goes that she was bitten by a black widow spider while preparing to be married and succumbed to its poison on her wedding day. And it wasn't long after her death that the mannequin appeared in the window. Customers of the store say they feel very nervous around her and that her eyes follow them, and she even changes positions. What do you think? A mannequin with a few extra bells and whistles, or the preserved body of a woman who died in a tragic way?
What exactly is Grimace supposed to be? All of the McDonald's characters make sense as to what they represent, and then there's Grimace. First appearing in 1971 as Evil Grimace, fitted with 4 arms that stole milkshakes and soft drinks. He was deemed too scary for children, so he was reimagined into the pin-headed, happy-go-lucky friend of Ronald McDonald. But what exactly is he supposed to be? Many theories exist about this purple blob. McDonald's tweeted out in 2012 that he is supposed to be the embodiment of a milkshake, but that all changed in September of last year. A McDonald's manager in Canada revealed that he is a giant taste bud to represent that the food tastes good. What do you think? Is Grimace a milkshake, a taste bud, or some strange intergalactic species? Maybe one day we will finally know.
Have you ever wondered what barber poles represent? They are colorful, fun, and inviting, but the colors and even the pole itself have a much deeper meaning. During the Middle Ages, you could visit the barber for a haircut, a beard trim, or even certain medical procedures. Known as barber surgeons, you could visit them for bloodletting, bone setting, and even teeth extraction. The look of the barber pole represents bloodletting. The red represented the blood, the white represented the bandages, and the pole itself symbolizes the stick that patients would grip onto to make their veins more prominent. In Europe, the poles are red and white, but in America, they feature blue. So what does blue represent? One theory suggests that it represents the vein. Another says that it's a nod to the American flag. The World War II serial killer you've probably never heard of. His name was Marcel Pétu, and he was a World War II French medical doctor and also an active serial killer. For the price of 25,000 francs, he pretended to have a way to safely transport Jews, resistance fighters, and other criminals to Argentina, telling his victims that the country required vaccination, but really he injected them with cyanide. He then took their valuables and disposed of their bodies, first dumping them in the Seine River, later dissolving them in quicklime. Due to his house emitting a foul smell, authorities were notified, and that is when they discovered the bodies of 27 of his victims. During his trial, he admitted to killing some but not all of the victims found in his home. He was convicted of 26 murders and beheaded in 1946. It is believed he murdered upwards of 60 people, but the actual number still still remains a mystery. Why do wine and martini glasses have stems? Other glasses don't have this, so what's the point? It's not to make you feel fancy and sophisticated, it's what you're supposed to hold on to while you enjoy your drink. You see, when you hold on to the bulb, your hand actually raises the temperature of the beverage. Wine, especially expensive ones, are meant to be served at a very specific temperature. So by holding the stem, you are preserving that temperature and not risking altering the taste. All of these houses have one thing in common, a crooked 45-degree window. But why? They are known as witch windows or coffin windows. They are mostly found in Vermont, although some other New England states do have them. And the reason for their existence is rather unclear. One legend claims that they were installed to keep witches at bay, claiming that witches couldn't fly their brooms through off-balance windows. The coffin window theory says that it was easier to remove a casket from the upstairs through the window. If you think about it, neither one of those makes any sense. Maybe it's just as simple as practicality and affordability. But what do you think? Say hello to Mindy, the girl from the year 3000. She is quite the looker. Mindy was created by tech company Toll-Free Forwarding after collecting data on how technology may impact our future development. A hunched back and neck are present due to looking down at screens. She also has text claw from gripping onto a smartphone for long periods of time. A 90-degree elbow, which is called smartphone elbow, thicker skulls, smaller brains, and even an extra set of eyelids. The eyelids would prevent headaches, eye strain, and blindness.